me to record. So definitely, please ask any questions or comments. Can go in the chat box, and we do have a time for Q&A after this. So uh, I work for Religions for Peace International, and when I say international, I am with the International Secretariat, and I am Program Officer of Partnerships in Interreligious Education. We have several staff members that are part of the International Secretariat. One who's here today, Jill Hunder, and she is a Program Officer of the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund, and she will share a little bit about that, as well as gender, and she also works on environment with the Interreligious Rainforest Initiative. So we have a lot going on in regard to what we do, but I wanted just to give you also just a kind of a background on our organization and how we operate. We are present in over 90 countries now, and we work specifically, the International Secretariat works specifically with international religious leaders, youth leaders, women leaders, and we do have people in the United States. However, that's mostly through Religions for Peace USA, which John will explain later on. But what we do at Religions for Peace is where we bring religions together to join and ensure that all people enjoy peace, harmony, and prosperity. And we see the world's challenges and understand that they can benefit from an interfaith, innovative, and inclusive response. And by that, we have established a global movement that is distinguished by its global leadership, by its interreligious councils, which I'll show you a little graph of that, and a little bit to explain how our IRCs, as we call them, our interreligious councils, operate. And then also how our IRCs and how we work to respond to the challenges, everything from war and violence and discrimination to environmental degradation. So we work in several different areas, and we have several different strategic priorities, and those are promoting peaceful, just, and inclusive societies, advancing gender equality, nurturing a sustainable environment, champion the freedom of thought, conscience, and religion, strengthening interreligious education, and fostering multi-religious collaboration and global partnerships. So we do a lot. And as we work in those areas, we have specific partnerships with several entities all around the world. We are UN affiliated, and we have consultative status with the United Nations. Our office is actually right across the street from the UN. And so with that, we have access to and working partnerships with UNHCR, with UNICEF, several other, again, UN entities. We also partner and work with organizations such as the WHO and other bigger institutions such as Georgetown University. And so we work and have these partnerships. We work with United Religions Initiative. So all of these partnerships enable us to do the work that we're doing holistically and connecting in a way that's very, very important for us in regard to getting our work done. And so, as I mentioned before, as our interreligious councils, so each interreligious body affiliated with Religions for Peace is self-led. That's very, very important, but is also part of the global Religions for Peace network. So these action-oriented councils and women and youth networks are multi-religious, and if you will, they are public in character. They're led by the representatives of diverse religious communities, and they are designed to provide a platform for cooperative action throughout the different levels within these religious communities, from grassroots to the senior-most leaders. And our successful RFP bodies serve as bridges between diverse religious communities that can help build trust, reduce hostilities in areas of conflict, and provide a platform for common action. A lot of people sometimes wonder when I try to explain what I do, I always say we do peace building and peacemaking. Peace building is something that is sustainable, that is always happening, and the work we're always doing is we want to create and help create and work on with others creating sustainable communities that have everything they need: healthcare, access to water, education. Women have the rights that they should have, and so all those things are in the line, if you will, of peace building, which is a very simplistic definition. Peacemaking is also part of peace building, but specifically if you're going to look at things such as walking into Ukraine and doing any kind of peacemaking work, we have religious leaders on the ground that are doing that, and we support them in any way possible. But we don't send teams specifically out into conflict zones, but we have in the past actually stepped into conflict zones and active conflicts to work on negotiations along with other UN entities. So that's just a little bit in regard to how that works. And then in regard to the way we operate, we recognize that religious communities should be the main agents in multi-religious collaboration. Thus, we engage religious communities through their own representatives: leaders, outstanding persons, grassroots congregations, and other organizational manifestations. So I want to actually just show screen really quick so you can kind of see how we operate. And hopefully you can see this. So we have our World Council, and then attached to our World Council, we have trustees, and then we have the International Secretariat. And then outside this circle are all of the regions that we work in: Europe, Latin America, Africa, Asia, North America, and the Middle East. And so then all of these regions have national IRCs, and then from the national IRCs, they have local IRCs. So there's a lot going on in these circles, but that's kind of a way to give you a visual as to how we work and how the International Secretariat is connected to all of these organizations and people that we work with throughout the world. And what I've learned in a year, it'll be a year that I've been with Religions for Peace tomorrow. And what I've learned too is that with this, many, especially if you want to look at United Religions Initiative, which is kind of our, if you will, sister organization, but they work more at the grassroots level, a lot of our IRCs and URIs, CCs overlap. So that kind of gives more power to those movements, if you will, that are working on the ground. So that's just a little peek into how we operate in that way. And then just in regard to kind of what our goals are, we're committed to leading effective multi-religious responses to the world's most pressing issues. And we believe that these ambitious goals and complex problems can be best tackled when different faith communities work together. And so we have several things that we make a lot of statements. We do a lot of work with our religious leaders. We work alongside global coalitions, such as with, assuring solidarity with the people of Myanmar in the wake of executions. We have our Religions for Peace South Africa, which just hosted an interfaith youth climate program, which is very, very important for us. We have our partnership with the Interreligious Rainforest Initiative, IRI. We have Ben Mias, who is seconded to us, who works on IRI, and we work within the IRI structure and within UNEP. Our Secretary General, Dr. Azza Karam, has been with us since 2019, and she has former experience at the UN, as well as actually former experience working with Religions for Peace, and then she came back. So she brings a wealth of experience and knowledge to our organization. And then we also have, several things happening in Guinea, in Kenya, with Faith for Positive Change for Children. And I could go on and on, but we do have a lot happening. And I wanted to actually pass the floor to my colleague, Ms. Jill Hunder, And Jill, again, is our program officer of the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund, and she also works on gender and issues of environment with the IRI. And Jill today is going to just share a little bit about our Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund and how that works and who our funding has been helping. So Jill, I'll pass the floor to you. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much. Yeah, so the Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund launched in 2020 for the first time. That is prior to my start with Religions for Peace. I started about 6 months ago. And when I started, the third phase of that Multi-Religious Humanitarian Fund launched. So we had a publication on our website and in our social media that opened the door for applications for seed grants. So these are usually grants between $5,000 to $10,000 globally in 10 identified countries. So we looked at countries with a current or recent conflict. That could be a religious conflict, could also be a conflict due to another nature, for example, the Russia-Ukrainian war. And out of those proposals that we received, we funded near to 20 proposals. Why I say near to 20 is because we are still waiting on finalizing 2 proposals. So it will be in and around 18, 19, 20 proposals that we funded. So out of the top of my head, it's a large list of countries, but we have Myanmar. We had opened for Bangladesh, but we have not funded there. We have funded in Burkina Faso, for the Ukraine, Haiti, Afghanistan, Syria, the DRC. And so those are some of the countries. And then for the Ukraine, we've also funded Religions for Peace in the UK, both their Women of Faith network as well as their interfaith youth networks. They have both partnered with other organizations. And so what all these proposals have in common is that they help refugees or internally displaced people that are on the move because, sorry, I was reading a comment from Karen. Because of that, the conflict. Then Religions for Peace identifies a couple of different proposals that we fund. So one could be providing direct aid, for example, through the provision of food or through the provision of other physical goods. So that could be hygiene products, it could be food typically, could be medical kits. So tangible things that you can purchase and that you can give to people in need. We also have funded direct services. And what we have funded mostly, which I think is always very interesting to mention, are psychosocial support with interfaith or interreligious nature. So all of the proposals that we have funded are interreligious, both in their approach as well as in the when it comes to the beneficiaries. So that means not just Christian and Muslim, some proposals where you can think of, for example, Afghanistan or Syria, we will have beneficiaries with both a Muslim or Christian background. But if you consider Haiti, that goes beyond those traditional religions, for example, even benefiting people that are following the voodoo traditions. All of the proposals are interfaith, as I mentioned. Some of them focus on the youth, some of them focus on adults, some of them have a very short time frame, and then others focus on sort of a very sustainable approach. The first project that we funded in the Ukraine was organized by an interfaith organization in the Ukraine, and they organized interfaith dialogues based on different scriptures, different religious traditions, kind of looking at the sort of the psychosocial support that religious traditions can provide to people in need and people in distress. And what was also interesting about this implementation of this program was that it was mainly led by women, of course, because the men were asked to fight. And so we try to focus on the gender balance in all of the programs that we fund as well. The reporting for that proposal has been handed in, so we're happy to sort of have finalized that the first proposal that we funded, and we've also published sort of their reporting on our website, or success story as we call it, so you can have a look. Maybe that's what Karen just posted, I'm not sure. But I can also share it. She shared the website for the humanitarian fund. So when you go to that website, you will see all the stories of the proposals we funded in the past. So as I just mentioned, the fund started in 2020, initially with a response to COVID. And as I just mentioned, then it expanded to funding proposals that focus on providing direct support to refugees or internally displaced people as a result of a conflict. So I invite you all to have a look at that website. It's really quite impressive what we've been able to do with just small grants, right? Between $5,000 and $10,000. And the idea is also that we're going to continue with this fund. It's really unique because of its multi-religious focus. And this is a really important factor of us. For example, at the moment, I'm working with RFP Germany, because they are partnering with a Christian collective that is very experienced in providing services to refugee seekers as well as asylum seekers. And what we will always advise is that Religions for Peace Germany takes the lead on such a proposal, so that multi-religious component is always guaranteed. So as I just mentioned, that in that sense, it's really unique. We haven't seen any other fund in the world operating like that. The Secretary General of the United Nations has also acknowledged us for that, so you can also find that on our website. They've said that he has said that it's a very much needed and effective approach, because what we've seen, of course, and I'm sort of preaching to the choir here, but is that religious communities are usually the first to respond to humanitarian crises. And that by working with an interfaith approach, you even strengthen that local capacity and you remove any sort of further conflict that could arise in humanitarian situations. So I think it's really, really something we can be proud of, and it's most certainly a joy to work on it. I've been in touch with partners and organizations all over the world, and what we can expect in the next couple of months is that we're going to roll out all these success stories and publish them on our website. So I really invite everyone as well to keep an eye out on our social media and our website, and to read more about these stories. And another last note on that is that we have primarily focused on the Ukraine this time because of the urgent need sort of in that country. We funded a little bit more proposals in the Ukraine, 5 in total in comparison to the other countries where we funded between 1 and 2. But at the same time, we also acknowledge that the Ukrainian conflict is not the only conflict in the world. And what we are also looking at is how can we merge sort of this humanitarian support with IRC development. So those are two separate things. Karen spoke a little bit about IRC development, but what we do, which I think is quite interesting, is that instead of just having a humanitarian response in the moment, so very ad hoc, we also look at the sustainability of the programs and how can it help people sort of strengthen their capacity to be better able to respond to crises in the future. And when we are partnering with an RFP, a local IRC, for example, in the UK or in Germany, how can we strengthen that local and national capacity for them to continue providing support in the future? So if anyone has any questions about it, you're welcome to ask me now or send me an email.
Great. Thank you so much, Jill. Really appreciate that. And if anybody has any questions, you can put them in the chat box, or you can save them until our Q&A. But thank you again. Great. So before we move on, question? Yes? Anybody? No? Okay. Before we move on, I just wanted to also just acknowledge that we have a couple other people from Religions for Peace on the call today. Thomas Smith, who was our intern for this year, is from Garrett Evangelical Theological School. And then we also have Vasu Bandhu, who's joining us today. And Vasu actually is our go-to fantastic interpreter. And without Vasu, we would be in a lot of deep trouble. So we appreciate Vasu very much. And then also Katyani has joined us, and Katyani is also one of our interns. So I just wanted to acknowledge those 3. me before I move on. So I just wanted to now welcome again John Pinter with Religions for Peace USA, and Mr. Pinter will explain how RFP USA relates to the International Secretariat and also talk about the great work that they're doing. So John, I will pass the floor to you.
All right, good to be with you all. I'm going to make you watch my PowerPoint because, you know, they're so eye-popping that you would feel lost if you didn't get to see them. So I apologize for that. So good to be with you. And what I'm going to try to cover in just a few moments is the prelude of what United Religious Community is about. So we're one of those bubbles out there on that schematic that we saw about how RFP International works, at least view ourselves there, and then talk a little bit about our Religions for Peace USA. So United Religious Community of St. Joseph County, the home of the University of Notre Dame, South Bend, Indiana, Mayor Pete, now Secretary Pete, generally the context in which people know our area if they're not from this part of the Midwest. And I actually met several of you. I see the Alberts, Bettina on the call there. We were invited out to the meeting that North American Interfaith Network had, a planning retreat. I think it was in November of 2019, with the idea of our hosting and the plan to host the NAIN Connect about this time in the year 2020. As you all know, a lot of things happened in the interim there, but it's good to reconnect with you. Our mission as an organization, we have been around, this is our 50th year. We encourage interfaith religious cooperation, seek to effect constructive change, and to work as advocates for those seeking to meet life's basic needs. Sorry, I read through that poorly. I should just roll off my tongue. But basically, it kind of fits into 3 areas. We're a small organization. We do serve this area, but we encourage interfaith dialogue, work around, in particular, around advocacy kinds of issues where we feel that the interfaith community can have that word united in front of it. So we may not pick certain issues to take stands on. Anybody that wants to be a member of URC is their tradition is likely to be against violence and poverty and for integration of the stranger and those kinds of things. Our work is with something called the Advocacy Center, where we help people out. We were very busy during the pandemic, helping people with some basic needs kinds of questions. We welcome visiting scholars and others from groups like the Open World Forum, like the Young African Leadership Initiative, and we've recently become, very quickly, a site for refugee resettlement, particularly for Afghans who arrived after the fall of Afghanistan about a year ago. So that's a little bit about URC, and we don't have a parent organization per se. We have colleagues around here. When we were putting together the plans on the NAIN, or the North American Interfaith Network Connect, we were trying to figure out who in the Midwest, who's near us that's doing this kind of stuff and is encouraged by this type of work, and found lots of examples, lots of different iterations of how that happens. And now there's this nascent drive to pull together some of those groups here in Indiana. So again, if you think of those, the circles out there emanating out from the center, we're kind of out there and working to connect with folks that are upstream from us, if you will. And so that's actually how I got to know a little bit about Religions for Peace USA. And so I'm going to turn my attention to what RFP USA is about. If I say RFP, I'm in my context speaking about here in the US. So we are a member affiliate of Religions for Peace International, and we work exclusively within the US context. We occasionally get some cross-border kinds of questions, or a Religions for Peace affiliate in another part of the world wants to do something collaboratively or have us connect them in ways. But for the most part, our work happens here in the US. And I put the website down there below, and I think I have it on the very last slide as well. So this is our mission statement. Religions for Peace USA inspires and advances common actions for peace through multi-religious cooperation among our nation's religious communities. Chiranjeev is our executive director. Some of you met him. I actually met him at that same meeting. And we are both part-time folks with this. I'm about 5 hours a week on average. Taranjeet is also a professor at Ohio State University in something completely unrelated to interfaith work. And he's got quite a heart for this. And as we got talking about things, and he's really helped guide me around the questions of what's the space, the world, if you will, for RFP USA. How is it different? How do the language around interfaith, interreligious, and some of those words? So it's a real important distinction that we think of as the RFP USA place is to work with the leadership of the different denominations, the different congregations out there. Whereas in my case at URC in South Bend, Indiana, we want to work with anybody that's involved in that, particularly faith communities of all stripes, whether they are lay-led, ordained-led, either we want to work with those groups. So it's an important distinction as to who the audience there. The vision for RFP USA is we envision a nation in which people of faith and goodwill live together in respect and mutual support, creating paths to peace and justice. So these have been the mission and vision of the organization for a while. We recently held a planning retreat, a strategic planning retreat with our board. In our case, we call that the steering committee. And then the executive council is, because we're a membership organization, is the heads of the different congregations that are part of Religions for Peace USA, and asked this question and said, you know, we have the word peace in our name. Does that limit us? Does it define us? You know, and we had a great set of discussions around this to say, when people would maybe come to RFP USA and say, would you do a thing on racial violence, on gender equity, whatever, it's like, if it fits within the nature of what peace means in our context, then that is the kind of thing that RFP USA is likely to work. So I found it, when I first came into this work, somewhat potentially limiting, but helps us to really define what does peace mean in our context as the leaderships of these organizations. So more on that to come. So what is Religions for Peace USA's programming? Well, historically, the organization's been around for a while, and it's had some ups and downs in terms of the size. I mentioned there's just 2 of us that are part of the staff with it. And we've changed quite a bit over the years. During the pandemic, and this is really where I became familiar with RFP USA, is the quick move, as so many of us did, to doing programming that was virtual in some way. And they were very well attended, very much appreciated, particularly in the early stages of the pandemic. And usually what would happen was during the course of a month, there would be one session that was an interdenominational, interfaith prayer service around an issue like healthcare or peace. And then there would be a program offered in the latter part of the month on a similar issue so that they would relate to each other. The in-person programming that RFP USA did prior to the pandemic was fairly limited anyhow. And so the virtual programming really, brought a lot of people into the fold as individuals, but also as potential members and congregations. And by the way, a little pitch here, all those programs are free, and our next one is coming up on Thursday, August 18th. I think that's next week. And it will run from 2 to 3 p.m. Eastern time. And the topic, sorry, I'm not very good at screenshots, but the topic is the fear of the Great Replacement theory and its impact on society. And that's going to be on, as I say, August 18th next week. So please feel free to sign up and join us for that. If you can, just find out a little bit more about what RFP USA is about. And we have these planned out. As I say, they have been pretty popular. They've become very specific around issues. We did one on reparations last year, for example, with a professor that Thomas might meet up, or not a professor, excuse me, a pastor of a church up in Evanston, Illinois, which is at that point, at least, was the only city in the US to have a reparations plan for that community. And so we said, well, that's of national interest. Let's offer a topic around it. So again, more on that. And if you have ideas on these, we are glad to hear them, especially if you can give us ideas on expert, knowledgeable people that can give a good presentation within an hour's time. So, last couple of points here. Wanted to show you this organizational chart. We have a cool orbiting one, I suppose, as well. And the way RFP USA works is there's the Council of Presidents. So any member organization, we are driven by membership from the different congregations. They have very diverse membership of denominations that are involved with us. And then there's a leadership council that's appointed by that Council of Presidents as well. The Executive Council is the members most active. Anybody that is, any organization that's a member of it can have somebody serve on that Executive Council. And in the membership context, they meet twice a year and ratify the bigger picture kinds of things and who will actually serve on the steering committee or board. But the steering committee itself, which is about 8 members right now, is the most active part, is what in my nonprofit life I think of as that's our board of directors for RFP USA. And then, if need comes up, we create task forces around certain issues with that. So, and then the secretariat means the couple of staff people. We try to use the equivalent language of Religions for Peace International because we are a member of that international body as well. So, and I say thank you for that, Dr. Taranjeet Singh Bhutalia as our executive director, and hopefully you can read his email there. And then I'm the finance and development director, meaning basically that I help put together the financial records of the organization and then try to raise funds and membership to help improve those. We're a relatively small budget. I saw a question in the chat room earlier about how is RFP International funded. We are primarily membership driven and occasionally get donations from the general public and seek project funding. This is going to be one of our growth kinds of challenges, is that as we seek even small grants from the philanthropic world that is interested in interfaith kinds of work, is that would likely let's try a project of peace building or peace connecting or working with universities and local groups in a part of the country. And we've written a couple of grants around that thus far without great success, but that's one of the ways that we think of RFP USA connecting with groups like United Religious Community or the Poway Interfaith Council or some of your membership organization. Is what's something that we could affect and try in different parts of the community, not all parts of the US, and see how those work, and then see if there's replicable opportunities within that world. So I'll stop there, Karen, and turn it back over to you.
Great. Thank you so much. That's actually very helpful for me too, to just learn a bit more about Religions for Peace USA. So very appreciative. Thank you so much, John. All right, so we have a lot of time still. We don't have to obviously use the whole time that we are allotted, but I just wanted to open up the floor for any comments or questions about anything you've heard from either John or myself. All right, Patrick, yes, please.
Thank you for the presentations, and I salute your service to humankind and the welfare of the planet. I am serving now as Dean for the Global Interfaith University, and we have a bachelor's program with an emphasis in international relations. We also have a program in education and a program in business administration from an interfaith point of view. And so hearing about this work, because our students will eventually be a new generation of global leaders in business and in interfaith. So I'd like to invite partnerships at some point. We have Ann Roth, who used to serve for the United Religions Initiative as our Director of Strategic Partnerships. Before we have our formal launch for students, we'd like to convene some dialogues. So John, you mentioned some ideas, and I really loved when the question came up about what does the peace and Religions for Peace, and I would love to invite a dialogue around the definition of peace being the positive peace that's talked about by the Institute of Economics and Peace, and invite some religious leaders through the Religions for Peace network, maybe to have a dialogue around those ideas and how Religions for Peace are involved in those specific peace building areas. I think that would be really fascinating, and maybe that's something that we could do together for World Interfaith Harmony Week. So this is just a brief snapshot of some, to preview some future conversations that I hope to have with both of you. And so far as the Interfaith Rainforest Initiative is concerned, that is one of my biggest priorities, and I am so thrilled to know Dr. Charles McNeil, who's just had this wonderful webcast on the SDGs. And so that's brilliant work that I'm hoping that our Interfaith University will be able to support as people become peace builders, learning about sustainable development, taking responsibility, agroforestry as business initiatives, especially empowering the indigenous peoples and women and girls. And so I just, again, I salute all of the work that's being done, and I really look forward to future collaborations and salute you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Yes, and we're actually currently working on a project through IRIs and Georgetown University, and actually interviewing and learning from Indigenous women who are involved with IRI, and that's going to actually turn into a publication. And eventually, Leah Beltrami, who is a filmmaker, will actually be making a film about some of those women. So Jill and I are active working with that. So it's great. Thank you so much. All right. Any other questions or comments? Steve? Yeah, Reverend
Yeah,
Steve?
Karen, if I can just throw in an apology. The talk zone that was scheduled for 12 o'clock, we had some technical problems, but everything's worked out, and there will be the talk zone on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. So, and John, it's good to see you again.
All good, all good. Thank you so much. Great. Any questions or comments or musings or queries, anything at all? Yes, Joe, hello.
Hi. I just wanted to say I really appreciate the work that RFP USA did during the pandemic. I was not able to attend every one of those events, but I definitely looked forward to those events. Each month I would try to get to at least one of them. And during the pandemic, they were really, really worthwhile. And I'm looking forward to the one on the 18th as well.
I'll pass that along. I get no credit for it. That's actually, as I say, how I learned about it. And I think the thing I remember most about it was how patient Karenjeet was when the technology wasn't working, or when there were way more people than the system would hold. And I thought, that guy is something else. And
he is quite remarkable. He's from Ohio, and so are we here in Northwest Ohio Multi-Faith Council. And he was actually a keynote speaker at one of our banquets a few years ago. And that's when I first met him. So when I heard he was involved with RFP USA, I wanted to see what you guys were doing. And I was really delighted to see all the variety of programs and the very, very interesting speakers. And they were almost always topical, and which is really difficult to pull off, to be able to find someone who can speak authoritatively about a topic that's so timely. And as things were shifting so much during the pandemic, there were always very interesting topics and speakers at those programs. And the prayer services were really good too. That's the other thing that I liked about it is you alternated a prayer service, which was a multi-faith kind of event. There was usually presenters from different faiths offering a prayer on a topic, and then a more authoritative webinar kind of presentation in the month as well. So that I thought that was a really nice structure that worked really well during the pandemic.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Joe, for that comment. I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments for anyone?
Well, Joe, if you're a friend of Taranjit, is going to be on the panel at the end of the week with Vasu and 3 other people discussing the future of interfaith. And that should be really, really interesting.
Thank you.
What day is that, Steve?
That's on Saturday.
On Saturday? Okay.
Yeah.
I feel like we're looking at the future of interfaith right here on the screen.
You know, that's what has intrigued me since the beginning of starting this project, is that there are so many wonderful, talented people from all different backgrounds that stepped up to the plate to be part of this week's presentations. When I first envisioned what interfaith, the global program should be like, I expected, oh, maybe 3, 4 people a day. And we've gotten to have so many more people. It's just wonderful. And you're all doing such incredible work. And Global Interfaith University, Patrick, congratulations. We need you. We need you. And there are so many of the people on this program that have books that could be part of your, class requirements, whatever. You bring in someone like Vasu, who can tell you anything about anything. He's an incredible resource. And then you take someone like Bettina, who knows everything. And you can, perhaps the one goal we had this week was to have collaboration. Talk to one another, get to know one another. And especially with the opportunity online, instead of hoping that 20 of your people from your particular city will come to a meeting, you can have 50 people from around the world. There's so many opportunities to do incredible interfaith work. And again, I just thank everyone who has even shown up for one session. And I know you're doing much more than that. Thank you.
Steve,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Steve, would you say a little bit about the talk zone and the goal for the talk zone?
We have so many different zones in our world, hospital zones, construction zones, everything's set up, but there is nothing around that says you two people can talk to one another. Now, I'd like you to imagine if you were walking through a city that you were not familiar with. Every one of us here has been on a vacation or a work schedule or whatever, and you're walking through and you just don't know where to go. Imagine if you saw this sign, this TZ sign in a window, inviting you to come in and say hi. That's all. That you're invited to talk to one another. That it becomes a safe place to come together and talk about anything. You're a lonely teen in a new area where your parents moved. Who do you talk to? Knowing that there's a safe place, Talk Zones allows an openness, and that's a passion I have.
That's a wonderful, wonderful thing to be creating for this. I was not aware of it. I've always been a talker. I've always been I'll talk to anybody. I mean, my mother and brother were always chasing me down and apologizing for me because as a little child, I would go and nail a stranger and start a conversation. But as my children grew up and were young men, they would come and talk to me and say they couldn't get a conversation going anywhere. They would go to coffee shops. They were lonely for conversation. They would really like to. The society, apparently, I don't think it was just my children. The society had changed in such a way that they could not find opportunities to meet and talk with people, just to talk, just to hear and listen and meet new people. So I said this in our listening group, and I'll say this here. Modeling communication. If I have any new bee in my bonnet, any new idea for the interfaith world, it's we need to model communication in a world where these things have broken down. And you're doing it.
And imagine places that you really get lonely in. Like the gate next to your where your plane's going to take off. And you come early because security says you have to come early. And you sit down at the gate and you have nothing to do. And you look around and everybody is looking the other way because they don't want to have eye contact with anybody. God forbid they should talk to someone. But I believe you, Bettina, and other people who are friendly have started conversations with strangers that perhaps turned out to be friends later on, where you changed cards, you said, I'd like to know you further. And perhaps they even taught you something or told you about a book or an article. Imagine going throughout the world and finding people that want to actually be part of whoever you are. So I apologize. I didn't mean to take anything. Karen, you have been so nice in getting this program together, and John, thank you. And I'll shut up now.
It's all good. All good. Thank you so much. Great. Well, we have time for a few more questions. If anybody has any questions about anything that John and I talked about, or just anything in general that you might wonder about interreligious education, interreligious peace building, what does that look like to you, or to our organizations, or any questions at all, any comments? Yes, Patrick.
I don't know how many seconds we have, but what is this listening group that was mentioned?
I'm sorry, who was
that? A listening group.
Oh, Donald's asking a question, Dr. Steve.
It was this morning.
Oh,
it was
as far
really
as
good.
Talk Zone, I'm sorry, Don.
There's someone mentioned a listening group in their area. I was wondering what that was. We have the 3practices.com for listening group. In Huntington Beach, we have HB Listens, where you have listening circles. We also have Huntington Beach Reads One Book, HB Reads, that encourages conversations. And we've had people set up booths for free listening. And I think we need to listen to others. So it's a little off the topic here, but that comment about having a listening group triggered me. But I'd like more people to talk about listening, really listening.
Well, earlier today, there was a program that was part of this event that was called The Virtue of Listening. And that's the listening group that we were talking about, that
Okay, yeah.
was talking about.
And Liz, what is the connection for that?
That was the North American Interfaith Network Group.
Okay,
Yeah, and Don, I can send you Shelton's email so you can connect with him.
great, because I want
Okay,
to,
I will do that.
in Orange County, we're really doing that, a lot of encouraging that,
Sure.
overcoming division by listening to each other. Okay, I'm sorry I had a meeting this morning.
No problem.
Great. Thank you so much, Donald. Patrick, you had a question?
So since you mentioned interreligious education as a topic, I am asking you to speak freely on that topic as I'm gathering information about how we're going to launch our various programs. It's a topic of interest to me. So I'm really curious to know about the work that you've been doing in that regard.
No, sure. And you're talking about Emmanuel's gig, right? Yeah, because
That's right.
I worked at URI for 7 years, so I know everybody in the URI network for the most part, and I heard about the his endeavor. He messaged me, so I'm very excited. In regard to the work that we do in interreligious education, it's every partnership that I have in my portfolio has an interreligious education component, and that could mean that I'm simply working with somebody that is doing, work within the interreligious education field, such as Catherine Marshall. We work a lot with Catherine Marshall from Georgetown, and also just I'm also working with the youth. We have an international youth committee. And so that also has an interreligious education component in regard to ensuring that we are always kind of viewing all the work we do within that realm. So we had a publication back in the fall when I first started, and that had the component just in regard to youth looking at peace building, humanitarianism, as well as peace building within their context with an interreligious educational component, meaning how can we use this and how can this teach us and how can we learn from this and listen to what is being said. Personally, for me, interreligious education is all encompassing and holistic. And that for me is just something. I have 3 theological degrees in that field, in peace building and interreligious work. And so I see it as being incredibly important to have the ability to have those aspects of interreligious education playing into and leading and guiding us in the work we do. Not everybody has access to that, and not everybody has patience for it, right? So I think it depends on what you're doing and how you're approaching your interfaith work and interreligious work in regard to how you have an interreligious education component. And you also have to look at what that interreligious education component is and how inclusive it is, and where is it stemming from, and who's talking and who's writing, because there's great material out there and then there's not great material out there. And so kind of being very, not necessarily choosy, but very careful, if you will, to ensure that what your interreligious education component has and contains is actually as inclusive as possible. And sometimes that's not possible, right? So we're always working on ensuring that all of our events, all of the things we do have women, youth, and almost every religion, if possible, represented, or at least as many as we can. And so for us, that's part of that that educational component that helps guide us to do the work we do in all the other areas too. So I don't know if that helps, but that's kind of where I am. And John, you want to add?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking on that, and I really appreciate that. Rigor is I think the word that came to mind with when you were speaking is like, and it's a slightly different variant on it, but I think one of the things that at least we're trying to look at for RPUSA and then for other interfaith councils is, do we know this works and how do we know this works? And that's one of the important ways to tie in closely with research that's out there, I think there's a huge opportunity for groups like ours to connect with the different interfaith institutes that are out there that are, academically know what they're talking about and need a vehicle to say, we need this to work on the ground. We know this works and we know these things maybe don't work as well. And so as a group, you think of inclusion, we have a Indiana Multi-Faith Council or Alliance. It's so new, I'm just trying to remember the language for it. But as we're working to say, well, who belongs in this kind of an organization, and how do they know if they're working on inclusiveness and the many diverse populations that they may have, even in small towns here in the Midwest, to create some opportunities for saying, aim for this, and then when you get there, aim for this. And I think that's one of the ways that we can tie some of these activities with research and action. So it's not just up in the clouds and in one's head, but happening actually. So end of homily. Appreciated your comments, Kim.
Yeah, no, thank you for adding that. And as you were talking, I was thinking too, Vasu has been wonderful in helping us translate, but it's more than just translation. When he comes into our meetings, it's creating that sense of language inclusivity, right? That sometimes is forgotten. And so if you have somebody who's not an English native or a native English speaker and you're providing translation, that's another form of creating an interreligious educational component that's really inclusive and that really helps people understand. Because I've been to many, many interfaith events where translation is not provided, and a lot of people in that room or on that Zoom call are really not understanding what's happening, and it's not benefiting them. And so if we really want, again, to have that sense of inclusivity, it's thinking about all those little tiny things that mean a lot. And so I just shout out to Vasu for just always helping us, but also just being sure that language inclusivity is there and present. So
thank you for mentioning that, Karen. It's so beautiful, the work that Religions for Peace do. I would like also to share that I met interfaith first in Religions for Peace when I was 18 in Central America. And that's very important, Karen. I will love also to know your experience in the Interreligious Forum of the Americas that was in Los Angeles. I would love to know, how was your experience with Latin America?
it was really nice, especially as a Mexican American who doesn't speak Spanish, because that's just a very generational thing, right? My parents, my grandparents, immigrated, and then when they moved to San Francisco, they didn't speak Spanish because they needed to assimilate. And so my parents raised my sister and I without learning Spanish. And so when I'm surrounded by my Latino brothers and sisters, it's a wonderful experience. And Fidela was wonderful. It was in Los Angeles, and it was smaller because of COVID and other things and funding. But what I appreciated about Fidela is that it really addressed some of the major concerns that Latin America specifically and the United States are facing, such as gang violence and the rise of and what that looks like, because the reality is that that's a war on the street, right? And that is it's a local war, and it's really important because that gang violence, especially in Central and South America, is affecting migration patterns, and then that's affecting where the people are migrating to, and the lack of food and the lack of water and the lack of infrastructure. A lot of people don't realize that many people have immigrated to Mexico, and right now a lot of people immigrated to Monterrey, and Monterrey has a water shortage, and literally people are standing in line to get water because there is none. And that is because so many people have migrated to Monterrey. So there's a lot there that's really important to understand about how the Americas are being affected by so many different things. And so I appreciated just learning from many of the women who were present, such as Lada Vargas and things, and others, who just have a perspective that I don't understand, even as a Latina here in the United States, to learn from them is just incredibly valuable. So I'm really happy I was there. So thank you for asking me that question. So thank you, Basu. All right. Any other questions or comments or musings or jokes or anything? Anything at all?
So I have a question as the distinction was made with Religions for Peace focusing more on the leadership, religious leadership, rather than the grassroots, but because of overlap with the United Religions Initiative, there's also a way that the grassroots interweaves. My question is, given all of those things, this and the relationship with the United Nations, what is the challenges and opportunities that you see with the grassroots and the religious leadership in interacting with the United Nations Forum?
Well, I mean, because URI also has consultative status at the UN, right? So it's a different group of people sometimes, and again, it is some of the same people. Most of our IRCs and CCs overlap in Africa, as well as some in India and a few kind of in the Asian region. But I think, and this is me personally because I've worked with both URI and Religions for Peace, I am all for collaboration and I am all for working together. And that doesn't mean that we don't, but the reality is that we're all fighting for the same funding. And so sometimes, we have to go our separate ways to be able to get funding to do things with these certain UN entities. But the reality is that we're all doing the same work. And so it doesn't necessarily affect us negatively. It may just affect us in regard to what events we are at, what events URI or other, organizations might be at. But again, the reality is that, Echo Peace, URI, Religions for Peace, we're all doing the same work. And the more, in my opinion, the more we collaborate, the better. And I think that that the UN is finally catching on. Professor Azza has been saying that since I started a year ago, is that the UN is finally kind of looking and realizing how important religion is in peace building, religion is in, environmental issues, and how these leaders, both grassroots and top level leaders, can really change and make a difference within the UN structure. And so, that's why we're doing more work with UNICEF. That's why we're doing more work with the UNHCR. And, URI just signed, a memorandum of understanding with the U.S. Institute of Peace, right? And so, again, I think the more cross-pollination and cross-collaboration we have, the more work we will be able to get done within these structures that sometimes, unfortunately, hold us back. So, thank you.
And and I'll leave it at that, but I think then also our role is to show those religious leaders that are working at that level to see the benefit of them knowing each other and working, leading with each other.
Right, exactly.
There's
It's not
plenty of work to go around in the peace now, unfortunately. So.
Yeah. I mean, and that's the thing, it's just, especially right now, just with all of the things that are happening in the world, the more that we all unite, I think the better. So.
Well, and also for the UN to understand that they're pitting, organizations against each other, which is the absolute opposite of their mission. And maybe they're just not realizing that. And there's a new paradigm that can be created.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
no, I agree with that. I mean, and we just signed a MOU. Well, Jill had joined, but it looked like she jumped off with, the Office of Sexual Violence at the UN. I mean, so we're really understanding and recognizing the importance of being able to partner with these UN entities, because one, it helps us get more work done, right? As a smaller, I mean, even though we're an international secretariat, we're still pretty small and we only have 12 staff members, I mean, and we do a lot of work in these 90 countries with our IRCs. So with that, as we partner with these UN entities, you're right. Like sometimes they're pitting us against each other, and at the same time, we're kind of pushing back and saying, this actually would benefit all of us if we work together. So I think it's just more about, and I think too, because Professor Azza worked with the UN, that is also helping us. And I know when Victor Kazanjian was at URI when I was there, Victor was actually my mentor and advisor and professor at Wellesley College. I learned a lot from Victor, and he is really one of the people who kind of helped URI get more involved with the UN and move more towards a consultative status with URI as well. So I think it just takes leaders who kind of just push back, and that's a good thing. Great. Any more questions or comments before we close? Asu, yes.
I would like to mention my appreciation of gender equity, equality in Religions for Peace. And I would love to mention also Thursdays in Black. That is a beautiful initiative to appreciate and to be aware, to create awareness about the importance of women. And I will also mention that I feel Professor Asakaram has inspiration as a woman and leader of a beautiful interfaith organization. I think is a beautiful inspiration.
Thank you so much, Vasu. I appreciate that so much. And women, yes, Women in Black is with the World Council of Churches, and it's to bring awareness of violence against women. And Professor Azza Karam is the first woman to lead an interreligious organization such as this, as well as the fact that she's a Muslim woman, and so it's incredibly valuable to have her in that leading role, and it's definitely modeling, hopefully for other organizations and entities to follow. So the more diversity we have within our organizations, the better, because then again, it's also recognizing that interfaith work is supposed to be and needs to be as inclusive as possible, even in leadership. So great. Thank you again, Vasu. All right. John, did you have any last words or?
I think that's a great place to leave it. Thank you.
Okay,
It
great.
was great fun to work with you on this, Karen.
Yes, nice working with you too. Yeah, John and I didn't know each other until just last week. So, again, thank you so much, everyone, for being here. I put my email in the chat as well, so feel free to reach out to me if you have any other questions. And just appreciate all of you being on this call, and be well and take care.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye, Joe. Thanks for coming. There you go. Awesome. Thank you.